How's it going? My name's Nico. I go by Cointrick and Cointricktwitch online. If you want to see more videos like this, please remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you get notified every time I upload another one of these videos. So we've been doing a series for a while now that we've been calling Build a Bar, basically where I show you how to make and master a classic cocktail, how to learn a couple more classic cocktails with a few other ingredients, and then how to make your own signature cocktail and learn some advanced techniques. And we're doing these in 3 parts, so this is part 1. And today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make and master the margarita. Quick note, tequila is made by crushing and cooking the agave plant to sort of extract the nectar and the sugars from it. Those are then fermented and distilled and aged in barrels sometimes, and that is how you get tequila. First, always start with the simplest recipe. I'm going to give you guys a recipe that only has 3 ingredients. The first of your 3 ingredients, and probably one of the most important ones, is going to be your tequila. I recommend starting with a Blanco tequila because it's going to be the easiest one to learn and master, the easiest one to work with. And if you're wondering what the flavor profile should be like, a good Blanco tequila is always going to be 100% Blue Weber agave. If it doesn't say 100% agave or 100% de agave, it's probably not high quality. And you'll know that it's right because it should have a grassy sort of vegetal note to it. You also have Reposado, which is going to have some oak aging, so you'll get some notes of like vanilla and baking spices. Then you have Añejo, where you have much heavier notes of vanilla and baking spices. And then Gran Añejo, which sees the most oak aging, so that's going to be very dark, very rich. It's going to kind of taste like a cigar box, crushed herbs and spices. So for a refreshing drink like a margarita, I recommend starting out with a Blanco tequila. If you have Reposado tequila at home already, that'll work just fine. The second ingredient that you're going to need is going to be Cointreau. Some people will also recommend using triple sec or dry curacao. I recommend starting out with Cointreau, but if you already have triple sec at home, that will work just fine. Your next ingredient is going to be your lime, or lime juice if you just have lime juice laying around. I recommend though using fresh lime. And then you also have salt, which is optional. And please use kosher salt. Don't use iodized salt, and don't use overly chunky salt either. Next up, what do you need in terms of tools and equipment to make your margarita? Well, the good news is that you don't need a whole lot, but you do need to decide whether you want your margarita served up in a martini glass or on the rocks in a rocks glass. I prefer my margaritas on the rocks, so I'm going to be using a rocks glass, which also happens to fit very nicely inside of this little coaster that I filled with salt. For equipment, you're going to need a shaker, jigger, and strainer, and if you're working with fresh juice, you're going to need a juicer and some kind of knife to cut your fruit. Let's make a cocktail. So the recipe that I'm starting with isn't going to be the final recipe that we end up with by the end of this video, because after we make the first one of these, I am going to dial it in, adjust it, make it a little bit more particular for my specific taste. But this is a recipe that I would work with at a bar. So you're gonna do 1.5 ounces of your tequila, whether you have Blanco or Reposado, just start with 1.5 ounces. Keep it simple, keep it consistent, and it's gonna be easier to dial in. Then you're gonna do 1/2 ounce of Cointreau, and then 3/4 ounce of lime juice. Once you measure all of your liquid ingredients and you have ice in your shakers, put your shakers together and shake it up. Before you strain your drink, make sure that you've salted your glass if you want salt on there. I'm gonna recommend that you just run the outside of this. Sometimes you'll see people just put it in there like that. Most people don't actually want the salt in the drink itself. They just wanna have a little bit of it. You can also only salt half of it if you like. Put your preferred kind of ice in there. I prefer pebble ice. And then if hopefully you haven't waited too long and your drink hasn't over diluted, pour that right over your ice, just like that. Garnish with a lime wedge. And there you have it, margarita. Let's see how it tastes. So the next step that we're going to cover here is going to be how to tell what is wrong with your margarita, right? How to describe it, how to pin it down, and how to modify it and change it so that it's better specifically for your taste, right? Because you're probably making this for yourself at home. To understand what is working and what maybe isn't working in your cocktail, you first have to know that all of your ingredients in every cocktail that you will ever work with only have about 5 roles. Some ingredients can do multiple things, but then most ingredients really only kind of focus on one thing at a time. So that's going to be liquor, lengthener, sweet, sour, and spice. So liquor, probably the most important thing for most people here, is your base, and that's going to be our tequila. 2 things to look for that will tell you whether the base liquor is the issue with your cocktail. 1, is it too strong? Does it have too much heat to it? And if that's the case, you're just going to want to add ice. You can tell here some of this ice is already melted. I might have been able to fit more in the glass, but in this case, the heat isn't really the issue. The other problem that your alcohol can sometimes cause, depending on the kind of tequila that you used, is it may be too pungent. Remember that sort of bitter, grassy vegetal note that I mentioned before? If instead it smells more like petrol, if it smells more like gasoline, you may be using a lower quality tequila, which is totally fine. Simple fix for this is just going to be to add a little bit of syrup to that. You can add simple syrup, you can add agave, or if you don't have those laying around, you maybe top it with a little bit more Cointreau. Your lengthener is basically the thing that you add that creates the body, teases out the flavors that you already have in there so that none of them are too intense, and it creates this sort of field where all of the flavors can really play well together. That's the best way that I know how to describe it. So if your drink is too watery because maybe you shook it for too long, or maybe you didn't have high quality ice, then your simple solution is going to be to add sweetener, which will add body to your drink. It'll give it a little bit more character, and a little bit more of those flavors will come up and out. Next, you have your sweetener, which here actually isn't a syrup. Here, your sweetener is actually going to be your Cointreau. So if your cocktail is too sweet, really simple solution. This is one of the reasons why the lime is your garnish here. Squeeze your lime in here, and that extra acid will help cut through the extra sugar and sweetness that's in your cocktail. That's not the issue with this one, so I actually don't need to do that with this particular garnish. And then the next thing is going to be your sour component, which to easily understand this, your sour component is almost always going to be the thing that is adding acidity to your cocktail to balance against the sweetness in your cocktail. If your cocktail is too sour, that just means that you may need to add a little bit of syrup, like I mentioned before, a little bit of syrup or a little bit more of your sweetener to balance out that bitterness, that sour. But actually in this instance, I would recommend remaking it with less of the sour component that you have. Your 5th ingredient is your spice, which is not in this cocktail. Your spice in many cocktails are going to be the aromatic components that sort of give more flavors. They add flavors in here. So if we had basil or mint in here, those would be our spice component. If we had bitters in here, those would be our spice component. If we had a really aromatic liqueur in here, like Fernet Branca, that would be our spice component. All of those things are missing, so this actually doesn't have any spice, which is one of the reasons why the margarita is so refreshing. So the question on everyone's minds, what is wrong with this margarita and how am I gonna fix it in the next one that I make? I lied, it's perfect. No, actually the problem with this one is that it is too crisp. There is too much sour in here. Remember the recipe that we used before did a 1/2 ounce of Cointreau and 3/4 ounce of lime juice. So you could flip those two, but if you're doing this as like a step-by-step process, you're gonna get really confused and bogged down when you start changing the measurements for multiple things at once. So instead, I'm just gonna remake this with less lime. All right, let's make version 2.0. First things first, get your ice ready. Get all of your ingredients together. We're not changing the measurement of the liquor in here, so this is still gonna be 1.5 ounces. I'm not changing the measurement of the liqueur, so this is still gonna be 1/2 ounce. And instead, I'm gonna do 1/2 ounce of lime juice. All right, put everything all together in your shakers. Clap your shakers together. break it apart. I'm actually gonna cheat here. Get your salt rim and your ice ready. And strain your cocktail. You want to save yourself some time, make sure you have your lime wedges ready ahead of time. There we go. Our Margarita Our Way 2.0. Let's see how it tastes. Cheers. Oh my god, so much better. So the reason I chose the Margarita is because it uses a liqueur, and it's actually a really good gateway to understanding other cocktails that incorporate liqueurs, especially orange liqueur, which is going to be one of the most common kinds that you run across, which is why you have things like Cointreau, Curacao, and Triple Sec are three of the most common ones. So in the next video, I'm going to be telling you guys how you can make a bunch more cocktails with a couple of extra ingredients that are all going to be in the same school, so they're all going to use a similar build, and you can use this same process to make and master those ones as well. That's going to be cocktails like Cosmopolitan, a sidecar, and about 3 other ones. So watch the next video, find out what those are. And in the final video, we're going to make a signature version of the Margarita. It's going to be completely 100% our own. We're making it from scratch. We're not following an existing recipe. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And at the end of that video, I'll show you guys some extra techniques that you can use so that your drink really stands out from the crowd. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for all of your help and support. Hopefully I've been helpful and supportive as well, since that's why we do everything here. If you learned anything during this video, please remember to like and subscribe and comment with all of the drinks that you want to learn how to make at home. And I'll see you guys in the next video.